Before I record a song, I need to know if it's going to work on stage.
Right.
I need to know how it feels coming out of my face in front of people. Because when you're alone and you're recording, it's the best song in the world. And then you take it into a room and you play it for people, and you realize this is the worst song in the world.
Welcome back to Spin Magazine's Lip Service. My next guest, Jason Mraz. Thanks for coming in. Happy birthday, by the way.
Hey, thanks. And happy birthday to you. I hope you have a birthday this year.
Actually, August 1st coming up.
Great. So. I hope it comes around.
It's actually great because your birthday was Friday, the release of the record.
Yeah.
Amazing to have
so
that coincide like that, right?
I know. When I was growing up, I loved albums that came out on my birthday. It was usually Delight, that band.
Right.
For some reason,
Random,
they put out,
right?
They put out records usually on or around my birthday. So I just clicked with them. In fact, one of their first albums called World Click. So I was thrilled. I think this is the first time I ever put an album out on my birthday.
Amazing. Well, it's a great record. It makes me dance, and I'm not a big dancer, but it definitely makes you move.
Yeah.
And it's an incredible record. We'll get into everything, your
You're
history.
a dancer.
I'm a little bit of a dancer, maybe. You never know.
You cause people to dance by dancing behind a drum kit.
I danced at my bar mitzvah, and ever since then, it was traumatizing. I've never danced since then.
I understand.
But you're actually here. You live in Oceanside, so you're in New York. We're in New York here. You did the last record here. You like New York? We were just talking about it for a moment.
I love New York. I think it's a great place to visit. Makes you, especially if you have a reason to come, whether you're working here or I guess traveling here for vacation, but you feel special, because it's such a unique place. And you're always surviving the day somehow, whether it's through traffic or the heat or just getting around. So I don't know. It's just, you feel alive here in New York.
Definitely a much different energy than Oceanside, where you're currently living. Right?
Very different. Yeah.
Well, let's take it back to the beginning. I'd love to hear about how you grew up and what music was like for you growing up. And you grew up in Virginia, Mechanicsville, I believe.
That's right.
So what was life like growing up for you?
Typical. White picket fences. We were a suburb of Richmond, which was a progressive city. It had a cool music scene, cool art scene. Virginia Commonwealth University's there. A lot of artists were there. So we were influenced by, I didn't, older friends that were going to college that tapped into cool art and music. They would pass it down to us. Otherwise, it's more of like a church-going folk out there. We're in Mechanicsville, so very conservative.
Were your parents into music? I think they were into like the crooners a little bit, right? Sinatra
That's right.
And things like that.
Yeah, in my mom's household, my stepdad was jazz drummer, and so he's always listening to jazz and or jazz fusion, and my mom was listening to the singers, the crooners, the Nat King Cole, the Bing Crosbys, stuff like that. On my dad's side, he was more rhythm and blues and oldies, so going all the way back to like the Ink Spots and then coming up through that like South Carolina rhythm and blues.
Sure.
Shag music, beach music, they called it. So a lot of oldies on my dad's side. And then my friends and I, we were on the radio. We were radio,
Because you grew up, you actually loved like Dave Matthews, I believe, right? You're a huge Dave Matthews fan growing up and things like that.
That was like my junior and senior year of high school. This local band, Dave Matthews Band, started to make waves nationally. And that really piqued my interest. Is that the word? Peaked or perked?
I think peaked.
Peaked. Because suddenly there was this singer-songwriter doing a jazz fusion thing and kind of disrupting the typical singer-songwriter thing and getting notoriety, right? Recognition. So that was...
In a huge way, by the way.
In a huge way, yeah. And so that gave me hope because at that time I was just starting to play guitar. And my dad had given me Cat Stevens and Jim Croce, James Taylor, those types of records. And it was okay, it's my dad's music. But then Dave Matthews started to do that kind of music, but with jazz sax and crazy drums.
People forget how big an artist Dave Matthews is. He's huge. He's playing like stadiums.
Huge, yeah. Very huge. I mean, the early days when they were the original five was, unmatched. His songwriting was great, and I think it was also the combination of songwriting with Leroy Moore on sax and Carter on the drums and how it all came together. It's a much different band nowadays, but still huge. And Yeah, they were a big inspiration. They showed me that it was possible that I could make noise where I was in Mechanicsville and carve a path for myself.
Well, you've done great with that. And talk to me a little bit about school growing up. What was it like for you? Did you like school? Were you a good student?
I learned in school how to basically BS and hustle my way through life, right? Because
like a lot of us.
yeah, I wasn't great at academics, but I was awesome at anything in the creative arts. So communications, drama, music. I found in those courses I would excel and then keep my grade point up to like a C, which is enough to get out of high school.
Yeah.
And then you look at my history, government, math, it's just, I'm a failure at those things.
A C gets you through it, though.
It sure does. And that's a terrible thing to learn as a kid, because then you'll spend the rest of your life knowing that I only got to get a C on this to get through it, But I think the hustling and the BS part was like, making friends with the principal and the teachers and really showing up and showing that I'm present. I may not have given you all of my homework, but I'm here today and I care about something. And I think that then carried into every job that I had after high school. It was like, I didn't care about the job, but I'll show up and I'm present and I'll do a C average for you because this isn't my career. My career is songwriting and I'm going to be a musician. And I always knew that no matter what job I had. Even in high school, I knew that.
Because you had some weird jobs, by the way, right? Like very
yeah, and I'm sure every musician did,
Yeah.
right? Because we know in our hearts, we identify as musician. We identify as a creator. So if you're working a janitorial gig or you're working for the post office or you're a doorman or, a variety of jobs that I had, I did those jobs, but I never stopped identifying as an artist.
Well, you knew, but you were excelling at the arts, obviously. I think you took some classical training, too. I think you can even sing opera, which is
well,
maybe you'll give us a little taste.
Oh, my gosh. I'd have to warm up. That's a parlor trick. You need a lot of reverb. Yeah, in high school, I was very blessed, that our public school system had a music curriculum, music and arts curriculum, and we did since the second grade, which I think is rare for a public school system to have. So anybody out there who's listening who's on a school board, please keep the arts alive in your district because the arts teach us the ACE, the acceptance, compassion, and empathy, first of all, so we can be better humans and relate to each other. But then inside of that, my choral teacher, he taught us classical, Broadway, taught us pop music. It was just a little bit of everything. And I think that helped me going forward as a creator, be able to tap into, various styles and physical performance techniques as well.
And what point did you sort of get bit by the music bug? Because I think you had an ex-girlfriend that sort of encouraged you to start playing.
You
right?
know all the facts.
You
know all the facts.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was bit by the music bug very early. I think second grade, I got to sing a solo in a Christmas song. And I heard my voice echoing around the room, and I got to experience, what it was like to capture people's attention. And I was like, "Oh, this is powerful," So I would use that my entire childhood to go and entertain people, and that the ability to capture people's attention is a real I don't know, special talent, I guess.
Well, it's a magic in a way,
It's a
right?
magic trick, yeah. So I always had that, and I didn't know how I would become. I didn't know what kind of artist I would become. Early on, I thought, well, earliest of ages, I thought maybe I'll work at a theme park and ride the roller coasters every day, and then do the shows. Like that was exciting to me. And then it was like, well, maybe it'll be Broadway or a cruise ship. And then I started playing guitar in high school and started seeing other examples of that. And I thought, oh, this is mobility.
Local talent shows, high school, things like that?
Yeah, stuff like that. High school talent shows, sitting around with friends. it just felt cool. You could take the guitar anywhere. You could take it to the park, and it was just it was like a mobile sound system. And my first girlfriend, right after high school, she was a high school friend, and we became roommates after high school, and then that turned into a long relationship. She was a brilliant writer, still is, great poet, great storyteller. And as I was starting to write songs, she'd be right there and always encouraged me to sing like myself, I think early days I was trying to emulate Dave Matthews and Eddie Vedder and kind of shape my voice to certain sounds. And she would remind me, no, just sing like you. And then she would also encourage me to like write deeper, like think harder, like keep a journal and really explore, where words can go as they're coming out of you. So that was, very influential in my writing career.
And then at a certain point, you moved to New York. You go to school here, right? And you decided at that point was like, I think music is going to be my path and journey. Or did you feel like, let me just get through school. Maybe I'll move to LA. I'll figure it out. There's some coffee shops along the way.
Yeah. Sometimes I would just take the opportunity as like a placeholder. So the only college I got accepted to was the American Musical and Dramatic Academy, which was a 2-year program here in New York City for musical theater and drama. And it seemed exciting. I was like, this is a place I can go and learn and live in the city. Like, what a great way to live in New York City, to have housing and something to do. But I very quickly became more interested in the city and rollerblading around town and going to clubs and playing my guitar in Central Park and getting into mischief. So I dropped out of school, ended up getting a job at Barnes & Noble and just spending all my extra hours writing songs and doing, terrible things.
As we all did, I think.
Yeah, but it was a wonderful experience, and that was kind of the beginning of I'll take whatever job is necessary that will afford me time to keep playing guitar and keep writing songs.
Hey guys, today's episode of the show is brought to you by the all-new DLZ Creator by Mackie. The DLZ Creator is an adaptive digital mixer designed for podcasting and streaming, and it's what I'm using right now to make this very own podcast. What makes it so special? DLZ's Mix Agent technology takes all the hard parts out of making your podcast. It's amazing. It's easy to use. You have 3 selectable user modes from easy to enhanced to professional. DLZ allows creators to any experiences to make content of their own terms. With features like Setup Assistant, Audio Mix, Mackie has taken 30 years of audio legacy and packed all their expertise into a podcasting mixer that is not only top of the line, but incredibly easy to use. You can find out more about DLZ Creator at Mackie.com. Check it out, the amazing DLZ Creator.
And in about 99 or so, you started to think maybe I should move to the West Coast and get into music. But what was the impetus for you deciding to move there? Did you have friends there? Was it just some kind of cosmic thing where you decided this is definitely going to be just my path? I feel California calling me.
Yeah. So that my high school girlfriend had moved to California by this point, and
hopefully that lawnmower won't be in the.
Is that a lawnmower? Okay, great. No worries. I used to cut grass as well for a living. Yeah, I'm no stranger to that. My dad still cuts grass probably 5 days a week. Shout out to Tom Mraz out there. He can't hear us because he's cutting grass right now. But it's true. So my girlfriend had moved to California. She's now an ex, and she was encouraging me to come check it out. And I had also, read Jack Kerouac and Hunter S. Thompson, and there were listening to Bob Dylan, and there were all these through lines about the West. And I thought, as a writer, as an artist, I need to experience the West myself. And so in 99, I was considering going back to college, again, as a place to have housing while I continued to work on my craft. And before I started college, I treated myself to a trip to California. But the problem was I never left California. I drove to California for an adventure and was just so taken by the whole experience, by first the geography and topography of the land. It looks very different than the East Coast. And then also, like, historically, it just still felt new. It still felt like it was finding itself. Like, the spiritual revolution of the 60s was still just all over the place, all over San Francisco. And, it was only a couple of decades really after all that had happened. So I wanted to soak all that up. Whereas the East Coast felt like, it was still like people still flying Confederate flags. You know what I mean? It's like I wanted to get far away from that. And so I stayed in California. I've been there ever since 99.
And San Diego's infectious. I mean, if you're surfing out there, and obviously we'll talk about the coffee shop scene out there, it's just a place that you go and you never want to leave, the whole beach community. So I get it. By moving out there, I'm sure you were like, I'm never going back to anywhere else, especially not Virginia after being in San Diego.
Yeah, exactly. I try not to hype it up too much because it's getting crowded.
Oceanside, if you're listening, no one else moved there, right?
Yeah, Oceanside. It's actually on the fringe of San Diego, so it's not even a San Diego. It is a city within San Diego County, but it's kind of out there on the fringe and cool little spot. I mean, I chose it because it was equal distance between LA and San Diego, it seemed. And I started my career really in San Diego in the coffee shops there. That's where I really found a home where I could play weekly and have a residency that I could hone my performance craft and build an audience. And I was also making frequent trips to LA to do the same thing, play coffee shops and clubs up there. So Oceanside seemed like a nice spot to be right in the middle of both cities.
Let's talk about it for a minute, because you're playing these coffee shops, sometimes probably for 3 people, 5 people, 10 people, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But at a certain point, you really just wanted to make enough money just to pay your bills.
That's it. That was always the goal. When I dropped out of college both times, the goal was always just figure out a way to, make guitar and singer-songwriting my trade. I will trade my performance for enough money to pay my bills and my overhead in life, which wasn't very much. And I never expected very much, as long as I could, crash on somebody's couch and find a meal. If I was playing, then I felt like the richest guy ever. My friends and I, early days of San Diego, we always called ourselves the richest poor people we knew because we were just living the best life. As long as I had enough cash to get me to the next gig, I had no complaints. I had no fears. And I always believed in my songs, too. I always believed that they would get me to the next level. And so, I started the coffee shops. There was a premier coffee shop called Java Joe's that had a built-in audience and had a regular rotation of great songwriters. And I would go and watch and just soak up all their experience. But Joe wouldn't let me play there because I didn't have an audience. So I went a block down the street to New Break Coffee, which didn't have entertainment. And I asked her, I said, can I play here on Friday nights? I'll bring my own PA. I'll play. And she said, absolutely. Thank you for that opportunity. I believe her name was Nora. And within, 2 or 3 months, that little coffee shop was pretty packed. It started with 2 people that came. And the next week, they brought 2 people. And I literally watched it double each week because people would invite people. And so by the end of the summer, that coffee shop was packed, and Java Joe was well aware of it. So he said, why don't you come down to my place and play some time at my shop?
And now that I got an audience of 200,
yeah,
sure, I'll be
exactly.
there.
And I played Java Joe's for years, every Thursday night, years and years. And, I think Fire Marshal would allow 150 people in there, but Joe was easily doing 250.
Right.
It was just hot, packed, dangerous, but so much fun.
It is interesting because it all comes down to the songwriting, right? Because if you think about it, why artists succeed and why they don't. I mean, you only really wanted to just pay your bills, but your songs were great. So in the end, it's, 8 million records later, obviously a career that's gone on for 20 plus years. It all comes down to your talent and the songs. And people forget that how important and integral songwriting is as a part of this process, right?
It's the songs. And so I don't know the secret to it because I still have to practice songwriting. I still write a song a week, and every time I make an album, the page is blank, and he's like, how am I going to climb this mountain? What's it going to be? But early on, sitting at Java Joe's watching songwriters and going to 1,000 open mic nights and seeing the difference between what was a great songwriter and what was somebody who was boring or predictable, I just started to align myself with what I thought was great songwriting. It's like, don't be boring, don't be predictable. Go deep, use words and phrases that you haven't heard before, like just starting to make little notes of what made a song stand out. And then also melodically, could I emulate Leroy Moore's horns or Sonny Stitt or John Coltrane's horns and wow you with like what feels like improvisational jazz as I was singing these words as well. So I tried to combine all these elements of my youth and things that I loved about music for what then could just be performed by one guy on a guitar with limited knowledge of guitar as well.
Were there other artists a part of the scene that started to really explode? I don't know if Jewel was part of that scene early on.
Jewel had been there, done that by the time I showed up,
Okay.
But her audience was still there. So whatever fire she had lit in that neighborhood was still burning, and there were other singer-songwriters from her camp and friends of hers that were still in the room. Steve Poltz was one of those guys. He's still out there going for it. He's just incredible singer-songwriter and amazing performer. Gregory Page, still there, amazing singer-songwriter, performer.
In fact, you actually go there. You do show up sometimes. You love to do that.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Even when I started making records, I realized I can't turn my back on the room and the environment that got me where I am. And it's still a great place to go and test out songs, because before I record a song, I need to know if it's going to work on stage.
Right.
I need to know how it feels coming out of my face in front of people. Because when you're alone and you're recording, it's the best song in the world. And then you take it into a room and you play it for people, and you realize this is the worst song in the world.
And I've also heard you say a lot of your songs start out as shitty ideas or shitty songs, but
Totally.
they become these incredible, songs afterwards, right?
Yeah. One of my colleagues, Mai Bloomfield, she's the cellist in our band and on the record, she's a great songwriter. She says, write a shit song, because it's compost for a better song. Right. Put it down, and there might be one or two lines, or the melody from it is gold. And you can change the words and save the melody. So there's always a reason to write. And if you have nothing to write about, just write the shittiest song you can think of, because there's going to be something gold in it, yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever think that coffee would have such a through line in your life? I mean, you actually have like an avocado coffee farm now.
I know, that's crazy.
It's weird how this became this thing in your life that just never went away.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. I didn't care for coffee when I was playing at the coffee shops. I was a tea guy.
How could that be?
I know, right?
Your career could be based on coffee.
Exactly. I just didn't know enough about coffee, and I thought it was kind of gross. So I was always putting a bunch of milk and sugar in it, and this didn't feel good as a singer. So I was drinking tea, and then I wouldn't really discover coffee till about 2015, when I started, traveling the world, and I was dating someone who loved coffee and kind of started to teach it to me, and then I had a grand shift in my appreciation for it. And then, having avocados and coffee in my backyard is a privilege. It's the result of, having a little patch of land in San Diego. But also, growing up, I admired, guys like Dave Matthews, who I'd read in the paper, because he's my local band guy I admired. And I'd read in the paper that he would just bought like 60,000 acres in Virginia to preserve it as a forest, you know? And I thought, wow. And I'd follow Farm Aid and learn what Willie Nelson and Neil Young were doing for small farms. And I'd learn about land stewarding and conservationship.
You ended up getting involved in Farm Aid too.
I did.
Yeah.
Early on too, even before I had a little patch of earth, or right around the same time that I acquired a patch of earth. So they were very influential to me. And I visited Bob Marley's house early in my career and got to see how there was a garden and fruit trees and herbs. And
what was his house like?
Well, it's a museum now.
Okay.
Beautiful home, kind of a Victorian home, and they had a studio in the backyard. And a lot of people that he made music with and he sings about were still on the property when I visited it in 2003. So very surreal. And so anytime I would learn about how a singer-songwriter lived, I kind of I would sponge that and want to reapply it to my own home and my own way of living. So now I kind of live in Bob Marley's house now in San Diego.
Amazing.
I have a funny story about that. I know you've had Grace Vanderwall on your show.
Yeah, I love Grace.
She came to my studio once and she was like, wow, this place is so cool. And I was like, I modeled it after Bob Marley's house, which is a museum. And she said, what? Bob Marley's house is a museum? I was like, yeah. I was like, well, when he died, his estate. He goes, wait. She goes, wait. Bob Marley is dead? And I thought,
a couple years ago.
I had to break it to this sweet 12-year-old girl that Bob Marley was no longer with us. She had the worst day ever.
Ay.
Sorry, Grace.
Who would have known? well, fast forward to 2001, you ended up getting a deal with Elektra Records. And before that, you had put out some music. But that was really where it all started for you, right? With your deal with Elektra?
That was a big start, yeah, at least in the recording arts, yeah.
How'd that come about? How'd you get your deal?
So I had recorded my live shows at Java Joe's, and things were really, buzzing out of the coffee shop scene and in coffee shops in Los Angeles. And I was selling my CDs at those shows and online in the early days of the internet. So things were getting around.
This was the MySpace days, I believe, right?
Yeah, probably even before MySpace. I just had a website, and I don't even know how the word would get out other than email lists. And people would come to the coffee shop shows and take them back to their colleges, and then they'd order more CDs from me, and I was mailing them out.
And you could put the 5 songs on MySpace, only 5.
That's right.
And it would change periodically.
I feel like that was maybe 03, 04, that MySpace, and you could upload songs to it. And that felt like real digital freedom to upload a song. And I could change the songs regularly. So one of my early recordings ended up in the hands of an assistant to Josh Deutsch at Elektra A&R.
Who I know very well.
Do you?
Yeah.
And he was kind of my first, A&R champion, and was a wonderful human being. And even though he had interest, we decided we would do we made T-shirts for our conference room tour. And I went around to all the different labels and played my acoustic songs in all the different record labels and gave out T-shirts to this conference room tour. But none of them were as straightforward as Josh. And Josh had clearly listened to that, homespun recording. And he, talked about lyrics and he talked about the songs. And so that to me was like, you're the perfect person for me to powwow with. And it took us, probably a year and a half, 2 years from that initial conversation to finding the right producer and finding the right batch of songs to make the first album.
And I guess The Remedy was really the first song that kicked it off in a big way, 2002, 2003.
Yeah, and it was it almost didn't make the record either because I was so afraid of it. I had come from this acoustic, alternative sort of singer-songwriter world where my songs were long and didn't have choruses and they were a little abstract, and that's where I thought I was going to go. I thought I was going to try to make this new singer-songwriter sound.
Like a new genre almost.
I guess.
Yeah. Songs without choruses. It could have been a new thing.
Exactly. And I had crafted The Remedy in a co-writing session with The Matrix, and it was based on these raps that I was already doing in the coffee shop, but we had distilled it down to its essence in this writing session, and it just scared the heck out of me because I didn't know how I was going to perform it. The chorus starts before the verse ends. There's an overlap there, and that always troubled me. And then the fact that the production had 90 tracks on it, I thought, I don't know how I'm going to emulate this. And so I thought, no, thank you, but no thanks. And when we made the first album, everything was going smoothly until the last day of tracking. I get to the studio, and Josh is there, the whole band, the producer, everyone's listening to The Remedy, the demo of The Remedy. And I had not shared it with anyone, but Josh hand-delivered it to the studio, knowing we needed to record it. And I was so upset. I felt like, I was usurped. Uh, and everyone in the room said, "This is it, man. This is the track. We got to record this, and we'll do it our way. It won't sound like the demo, and we'll sweeten it to your liking." And, after an hour or so of resistance, I gave in. I was like, let's try it. And, the rest is history.
It's interesting because now you're independent, right? You're an affiliate of BMG, but really back then, it's probably always not terrible to have another set of eyes and ears on things that give you this objective view on songs. Because if Josh hadn't have done that with you, that song may not have kicked it off for you, right?
Yeah. I may not have had, I think we would have had a little bit of traction in certain regions, but the remedy went national.
Yeah.
And that paired with my tourings, I was already out on the road opening for a lot of bands and getting in front of a lot of audiences. So that paired with a song on the radio started to give me more freedom and be able to headline my own shows.
Yeah,
so it was a big deal. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Josh. I've heard you talk about Springsteen's talent, calling it his magic trick. But when did you really realize that you had this gift for songwriting? Was it when the remedy really started to resonate with everyone and you were like, okay, this is really working for me? Or did you realize earlier than that you really had this special gift for songwriting?
Yeah, I do think it was earlier than that. The remedy was a gift, but it was also a co-write. So I don't feel, 100% and that was another reason why I resisted it. I was like, this isn't 100% my expression.
You were looking to do songs without choruses.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I've loved songwriting since I've been doing it since probably 8th grade when I wrote my first song in civics class. There's something about, and then in college, what I would do is I would just make things up. People would hand me an object like a bracelet, or a Dr. Pepper can or a candle, and challenge me to write a song and make up a song on the fly. And I could do it. And it would sound like a song and things rhymed and it would have details. And so that kind of little magic trick of being able to channel your thoughts to a pattern and to rhythm and rhyme and melody was just something that always delighted me and mystified me and has kept me coming back to that process and that practice over and over again, to not to understand it or even perfect it, but just to I get a front row seat to the process.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. So I'll always do it.
Even now you have this songwriting collective where you guys send each other like words, the word
That's
of the
right.
day is, paper towels, and then you have to write a song about it, right?
Yeah. Every Tuesday night, I owe a song to Bob Schneider and friends. Bob Schneider's a great singer-songwriter. One of my top 5 faves.
We'll get into that.
Yeah. And, he's the type of songwriter that just goes all over the place. And I caught wind of him early in my career, probably 2000, around 99, 2000. And he was kind of a role model that I could do anything I wanted. And that's a very refreshing reminder as an artist. Like, you can go anywhere. You can make all kinds of sounds. Like, don't be afraid to try. So yeah, I've been in a song club with Bob probably since 2006 maybe, and it's a song a week. So after a year, you got 50 plus songs, and then after 15 years, it's thousands.
It's fascinating. Even a song like I'm Yours, you didn't immediately know that was a hit. You actually thought it sounded like a kid's song to you, right?
That's right.
And you were like, this is not something that's even going to possibly make the record again.
Yeah.
So again, back to that intuition where some of your biggest songs were not songs that you immediately knew were going to click with people.
Yeah, and that continues to be the case. So I'll write a lot of songs just to create a huge body of work. And then when it comes time to looking for songs on the album, I'll go through that body of work randomly. Sometimes it's just a shuffle on my phone will redeliver a song to me that I totally forgot about that has a cool melody or a cool hook. And then now it's 8 years later and I know what to do with that hook, or
Right.
I know what to do with that melody or even that idea. So I'm grateful for the practice because I think I'm only able to make records because I practice songwriting. I don't sit around and wait for the perfect song to show up. I have to constantly purge ideas out of my system.
There's a lot of artists, I think, that write records, Jason, that they write, 15 songs, they pick the best 8, but I hear that you write like 80 to 100 songs. I can't even fathom writing 100 songs for a record and then trying to like chisel it down to like the best 10. That's way more than probably I would think most artists are creating at that point.
It's a lot, yeah. But I say no wasted effort. If I'm in a room and I'm writing with someone and we get to the end of the day, we're like, well, this is a weird song. I was like, hey, no wasted effort, because that second verse is amazing and we can do something with that. Or so same, if I've got 80 to 100 songs, yeah, there's going to be a lot left over, but some of those leftovers might be half of the next record, Like, I just don't know yet until I get there. So no wasted effort, yeah.
There's going to be a really big box set one day.
There could be
7,000 songs.
Yeah, there could be. I don't want to bore people with throwaway songs, but there's a lot of cool stuff on my phone.
Well, fast forward to 2009, 2010, you end up winning some Grammys here. What was that like? It had to be definitely a pinch me moment. Starting in coffee shops, Grammys. I don't know where they are now. Are they in the bathroom somewhere?
They're in the bathroom.
They're in the bathroom.
Yeah,
okay. Which is always a great place for the Grammys, but.
Yeah, they're a little bathroom.
You don't like to show them off. You like to...
Well, yeah. The bathroom used to be like just full of stuff. Like you couldn't even
awards.
Yeah, and the Grammys had other awards kind of draped over them. But during COVID, I actually did a little remodel. I put up some wallpaper and I kind of like cleaned everything up to only the finest of awards in there. Songwriters Hall of Fame and a few things. So,
Song of the Year, Grammys, all that stuff.
Yeah,
some platinum records, maybe.
Yeah, Spotify Billion Award. There's some cool things in there.
All in the bathroom.
All in the bathroom. Yeah. It's a treat, but I got to tell you, when I won the Grammys, I hadn't gotten there yet. I was still in the line. I was on the red carpet doing all the various press, doing the press junket before you go in. And my manager just leans over to me and he goes, "You won them both." So I won both at the same time while in the middle of an interview. So I hadn't even gotten to the award show.
Good interview, though, I would imagine. You had something to talk about.
If you look at my face prior to that award show, I'm not smiling at all. I had this weird feeling of like unworthiness and almost like let down by Naris, because there were, James Taylor was nominated in the category and Stevie Wonder was nominated. Oh. And,
That's tough competition.
And I'm looking up to these guys my whole life. And I thought, wait, if I won these, something's wrong. Like, that's how I viewed it. I viewed it as less than, that I was less than. I thought, if I won these, something's wrong. And it was a weird feeling. It took me about a week to actually celebrate. It really did. Like, I just didn't believe it.
What'd you do at that point? You just you had a party on the farm or something?
You know what? I actually had a session with Willie Nelson about a week later in Austin at his recording studio. And I've been high before, but I'd never been high with Willie Nelson. And I was kind of hoping it would happen. I was like, I wonder if I'm going to get high with Willie.
That's a bucket list moment.
It's a bucket list moment. And he walks in with a doobie in his hand, already lit, and he hands it to me. It's the first thing we did. So even before we talked about the session. And everybody in there got high. Martin, our producer, and the band members and everyone, super high. And Martin couldn't move. He was locked into the couch, and he didn't know how to communicate. And this is where it's so weird, because a voice in my head said, "Hey, man, you got this. Like, you're a Grammy winner now. You have the confidence to run this session." And so I sat at the engineer's desk, and I pressed the talk back, and I asked Willie for certain things and asked him to raise the octave and try it like this, like that. I had to kind of direct the session under the influence of cannabis. And
even better.
Yeah. And I think I would have been a little paranoid and a little scared to make those requests of Sir Willie Nelson. I would have been a little too paranoid. But thanks to having picked up those awards the week before, I felt special. I really did. It was the first time I kind of celebrated being acknowledged by the Academy and being a recording artist.
Because you've collaborated with so many great people. I would imagine sometimes when you're in the room with people like that and some of your contemporaries, it is that thing where you're like, am I supposed to be here? Is this an imposter syndrome kind of thing? Or
Right.
should I really be here or not?
Yeah.
Or do I deserve to be here? But
Yeah, exactly.
I guess now it all seems like it makes sense.
It made sense a week later in Willie's session, yeah. But certainly at the Grammys, I felt like a huge imposter. Yeah.
Well, you did great, obviously. We're here about, I guess when you're about 40 or so, you're thinking to yourself, am I done with the industry? I've made 6 or 7 records. Maybe it's time for me to, reset and figure out where I'm going now. At that point, what were you thinking? Were you just thinking maybe I'll do something else in life, or I need to keep going?
Yeah, I when I was 18 and I dropped out of college the first time to pursue being a singer-songwriter, I gave myself till I was 40. And when you're 18, 40 just seems like a lifetime away, because it is. It's over half your life away. And I made a mistake there by saying when I'm 40, I'll give it till I'm 40. By the time I'm 40, I'm going to rock. That's kind of what I would tell myself over and over again. It's like, even if I don't make it, quote unquote, I'll have put in 20 plus years at trying, and I'll have to be good. I'll probably be able to, play guitar really well and be able to entertain. So the error in that was setting the timeline to 40, because then when 40 came, it was almost like I was already programmed to stop.
You felt like an obligation almost.
Yeah. And so it was on the horizon, and I thought, okay, here I am, I'm approaching 40, and I've accomplished a lot. I think I'm going to take a big break. I think maybe I will find something else to do. But
we should talk about it for a minute, because you also did Broadway.
Yeah.
You did photography. Obviously, you have many foundations. Let's not even talking about the farming things.
Right,
you got
right.
Avocado.
And farming is like, you can do that forever.
Right.
It never stops growing. So, and it's a business that struggles. Every farmer will probably tell you the same thing. So you really do need to put a lot of input into it. So I did. I leaned on my little farming business for a little while. Immersed myself in that, studied as much as I could to get that going. Yep, I have a foundation where we do cool projects outside of the mainstream stuff.
So at some point were you thinking, I'm just going to stop music and do all these other projects?
I think what I wanted to do, because by the end of my 6th album, and it was on a major label still, I went with Elektra Atlantic through all 6 records of my deal, and did really well with each album, and like actually delivered my contract. And I was so kind of exhausted by the end of that, and it wasn't until my 6th album that I felt like the competitiveness of that, because I always felt like I was in my own lane for all the records. Which was wonderful until my last record. It took me years and years to get the songs through A&R and find some traction and find a story and find how am I going to get on the radio and how are we going to put this record out. And it felt so competitive that I was just, I was kind of done with that whole process. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I was like, I don't want to compete. I want to just play and have fun. And so, yeah, when the contract ended, I had already done Broadway, and that actually helped me get my last record out because of the fun and success I had on Broadway. I was also, the theater in Times Square was 4 blocks from Atlantic. So between, the matinee and the night show, I would go to Atlantic and have lunch with Pete Gambark, and we'd talk about songs, and we'd work on the record, because I said, when this Broadway show ends, we should be putting a record out right at the same time. I'm hot right now, Pete, let's go, So we worked really hard on that record, but by the time it was done, I was like, I'm never doing this again. I'll just do something independent. Now, I've got 1,000 weird songs that no one has ever heard. I'll just do weird stuff.
Maybe 10,000 weird songs while you're writing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, the first thing I did was make a reggae album because I knew I could do whatever I wanted. I didn't have A&R. I didn't have a record label. And I had met Michael Goldwasser. He did a remix of one of my songs, Have It All. and we hit it off, and we both love reggae, and so we made a reggae album, which I thought was the coolest thing ever. And then I found BMG to be a great distribution partner to help me put new records out. And now here I am with my second record with them.
Your 8th record.
My 8th studio album.
And the title is?
Mystical, Magical, Rhythmical, Radical Ride.
I was going to say that, but you know what? You do it way better. I think I flubbed it like 3 times in the intro.
That's all right.
But you're working again with Martin Tereffi.
Yeah.
Which is great. And he worked on, obviously, I'm Yours with You.
That's right.
Led to the Grammys.
That's right.
It's a pop dance record. It's a great record, fantastic record.
Thanks.
Kind of inspired by your mom's journey in a way, right? And your stepfather and everything you went through with your family, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a culmination of the entire journey, and that's why it's called The Ride, because it's looking back at 20 plus years in the creative arts, but it's also standing in a place looking ahead, you know, having worked with mentors like Willie Nelson, for example. You see a path that's still possible for you, you know, so I can't help but fill my time with optimism and hope for what could still be an exciting and adventurous ride going forward. So having been through this sort of midlife, I'm going to quit and do other things, having been through that and realized that I'm still filled with creativity, why would I stop doing this? I get on the ride again. You know, I feel like I'm starting over. In my life, you know, this is the time in your life, in your midlife, when you start to lose parents. You've had enough heartbreaks and you've broken enough hearts to finally sort of wake up and say, how can I prevent this from happening? And so the album kind of is about starting over at any point in your life, but for me, it just happens to be right now.
Is it hard to remain positive all the time? I feel like all your songs have this thread besides coffee of positivity.
Yeah.
And I know they don't all stem from a place of positivity, but you turn it into this sort of positive affirmation.
Yeah.
And everything is this great message about looking at life. You know, there's 2 ways to look at life, and it's always this positive side. So is it hard to feel like it's always, you have to live up to this thing about always being positive? At some point, there'll be like The Cure by Jason Mraz, where it's all like dark songs.
Yeah. You know, I have thought about that, about doing an album of some of my dark songs that nobody's heard yet.
It would seem strange, right? Because you're known for being so positive and having a great message, by the way. And I think a lot of people should learn from that, because we are living in a time where we could all use a little more positivity in life, for sure.
Well, you know, I do it for a few reasons. One, because I'm a performer, and when I'm on stage, I want to be present and I want to have purpose. And that purpose is usually to guide people into a state of awareness where they love their lives, where they're grateful that they're at a concert, where they're present to their own talents and loves in their lives. So when they leave the concert, they maybe go home and practice their own craft, or they call a loved one, or they're just happy, you know? Like I love going to concerts. It makes me happy. So I want to then be someone who provides, you know, a little shred of happiness in someone's life. So that's the first part of it. The other part of it is like, so let's say I write 100 songs, 10 of them make the album. 90 of them might be sad, you know? And it's going through all of those songs and picking out the ones where I felt, you know, I had a real transformation on this song. You know, this is the song that I recognized I started, like even I'm Yours starts in sadness. I fell right through the cracks and I'm just trying to get back, you know. In the absence of God, it's still our right to be loved. There's a lot of darkness in that song. And songwriting is transformational. You go from silence to sound. You go from a blank piece of paper to having beauty tattooed all over the page. And it's such a cool thing to look at a song on a piece of paper. And it's this painting that you made. So you have a transformational experience of I am nothing to I am something. I am worthless to I am a creator. And so I can't help but feel that the act of creating is optimistic in itself. So when it's right, when the song has that transformation in it, that's what I want to put on the record. That's what I want to take to the stage. And so then, that's how I can get sort of classified as like a guy with a message or an optimistic artist.
I guess it's hard too because you went through some tough times with your family, but essentially a lot of this record makes you feel great, you even want to dance. We were talking about it. So again, just channeling that energy into dancing and positivity. You did it with Raining Jane.
Yeah.
You've been working with for like 15 years or not.
Right? Yeah. So I met Raining Jane. They're a 4-piece folk rock group out of Los Angeles. I saw them on a festival show, and they were just crushing it. Rocking the house, multi-instrumentalists, each one of them, beautiful harmonies. And I had to follow them, and I didn't know how I was going to. I was by myself that day. And after the show, I asked if they'd ever want to come over and be my band on some demos. And I didn't anticipate us to start writing songs, but we did. We started writing right away. And so since 2006, we'd get together a couple times a year and just write songs for the fun of it. In 2014, we had enough songs of our own that had its own distinct sound that we made our own album. It's called a Yes. And after that experience, we thought, gosh, we should do it again and do it again. So Mystical Magical is another album I've written in tandem with them. And one of the things that's fun about songwriting is you can try things you've never tried before. And I hadn't yet tried dance music. I love electronic music. I love dance music. I love disco. I love reasons to just rock. And I hadn't yet done that yet. And I didn't want to lean on Ableton or any programs that can help me get there fast. I wanted to actually be able to play it with my friends. So it took us many years to get these songs to where they're at. And then it took bringing Martin Terefe into the studio to basically be an extra set of eyes and ears. And obviously, great players like Sterling Campbell, who came in and played with us.
Great drummer.
Amazing motor. He just like gets behind the kit and he's just like, let's drive. Molly Miller, great guitar player, showed up on the record. Grooveline horns, David Davidson, string arranger. Like there was a lot of extra elements around us as a band that really helped us, thanks to Martin's guidance. To deliver this dance record.
But also no other label heads to answer to. It's really on your own.
That's right.
So who are you playing this for to get some feedback at that point? Do you play it for just friends and family? Are you bouncing it off your fans? Are you putting snippets on social media?
Yeah. I mean, you had mentioned my mom. I was playing demos for her, and they sounded a lot like our Yes album, very acoustic, very wispy, and she could tell we were trying to rock out and have some dance tunes. And she said, y'all just need to go pop. Like, don't be afraid to just go that direction.
I love that your mom is like your A&R at
totally.
this point. So.
She's like, y'all need to make a pop album. I was like, what?
She's like, have it sound like Jamiroquai.
Right. Oh my gosh, I love Jamiroquai.
Well, some of it reminds me of that, obviously.
Awesome.
Feel Good is great. I'm getting that kind of vibe. And great videos, by the way. I know you're not a huge fan of making videos, but the videos are great.
Thanks.
Pancakes and Butter is giving me like Wes Anderson vibes a little bit.
Yeah, cool.
But it's great. And the record, I'm sure it's great that you got to take it out on the road and sort of test it,
That's right.
which a lot of artists don't get to do. So
Yeah.
did that help? I mean, did any of those songs not make it to the record after you tested them on the road?
For sure. In fact, 2 of the songs that we were leading with last summer, we didn't even cut them in the studio because we played them on the tour, and we loved playing them on tour. It always felt good. And by the end of the tour, I said to the band, I was like, did you notice that no one ever commented on those songs and not a single person ever requested that we play it again? Whereas these other ideas, people were popping up in the audience like popcorn, I was like, that's a sign, So we went into the studio playing those pop-up popcorn songs, and we just bailed on the other ideas that we thought were brilliant, but, no one even noticed.
It is interesting, right? I mean, a lot of artists now test their songs on TikTok. They put out a 30-second snippet. I grew up in a time period where it was the album, it was gatefold, it was vinyl, it was a body of work that was sort of meant to be listened to from start to finish. But now you even have things like AI that apparently, I don't know, Paul McCartney used it to help finish a Beatles song, but that's what is being said. So do you think you could ever find a way for technology to sort of intersect with the songwriting process? I mean, how do you feel about AI? Could you see yourself using that as a tool?
I don't want to, because so much of the joy in it for me is the discovery. It's, there's an intelligence that already existed prior to AI that was bigger than me, that I'm a witness of, So when I sit and make up a song, some kind of intelligence is doing it through me. And I love that process. I would never want to give that up. I haven't played around with AI enough to know, but I mean, I love making demos, and I'll try to play all the instruments myself. Maybe there's a future where, AI can help me with that process, but I don't want to give that up,
I mean, it's a bit fascinating. So if you think about the early days of Napster and how everyone was fighting it, and then it became essentially the streaming services. So I'm sure there's a way that these two things will intersect and it'll be a tool, but in a way where it doesn't feel like we're fighting it. I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
There was a really great podcast actually the New York Times did about the Drake and the Weeknd song that was created by AI.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously if the artists aren't participating, they're not going to feel like, they're a part of the process. But then Grimes, released a song where people were able to use her stems and create their own songs and upload them to Spotify,
right,
which feels more finding some kind of middle ground where we'll figure it out. But yeah, it is pretty fascinating where it's all going. Let's talk about the tour coming up. Pretty exciting, right? Are you excited about this? I know you've been touring for years, but this isn't a coffee tour. This isn't a coffee shop tour, but it's a big tour. How are you feeling about it at this point?
Yeah, I feel great. It's kind of the sequel to last summer's tour. Last summer was just Raining Jane and I with Molly Miller, and we were testing out a lot of these new songs, and we had some great outdoor venues and had a ton of fun. But this summer we get to go a little bit bigger. The record's out, so now the audience knows what the heck we're playing, and some great big venues as well.
Any cities that you're super excited to hit up again that you hit up last time?
I have no preference. And, some cities we only see by loading dock.
Yeah.
You're only there long enough to see the venue, and that's it. And that's one of the beauties of performing and or being an artist, is that you get to go all over the world to all different regions, and your audience is filled with all kinds of people. Again, this goes back to what art teaches us when we're kids. This is acceptance, compassion, and empathy. And I feel like when an audience sort of has to go through those cattle stalls to get into a venue, there's a certain amount of patience and love, commitment that an audience member has to go through from the time they buy the ticket, from the time they park, all the extra fees that go into it. It's a real lengthy process. But something about when the music comes on, there's this unification amongst all these human beings, and it's a shared event. It's like we all agree to meet here at 8:00 at this dusty field or at this random venue, and we're going to face off with lights and music, and I'm going to sing and the audience is going to sing, and it's going to be this shared experience. It's really magical, and I'm so glad humans agree to do it. But honestly, for me, it doesn't matter what city or state it's happening in. I'm just always tickled that it's happening.
One of my favorite documentaries, Jason, is Searching for Sugarman, because it's about this artist that didn't know he was huge in, I believe it was South Africa,
I think.
And then he shows up there and he's like Elvis there, right?
Yeah.
So do you ever go to countries where you're like, I didn't know that my music was resonating in Uganda, wherever it may be, and you're just like, but for some reason it became huge here, and then really surprised you?
Yeah. Gosh. I mean, Asia and Southeast Asia is mental, and I have no idea why, but I am so grateful for it. When we go to Manila, I feel like a Beatle. Korea is big. Vietnam is big for us. Indonesia is huge.
The record's actually blowing up there already, right? I feel like there's certain songs in the record that are starting to take off globally too.
Yeah. I feel like Dancing did really well in Japan. And my manager set me there with my first album, and I think that was a big part of it, was make sure I go to these places early on and build my career from the ground up in those places. So I'm still tickled. Anybody that maybe tours and or goes on a holiday to, say, Thailand or something, they always send me a video of some guy in some random hut in some little
Jason
village
Mraz.
playing I'm Yours, selling coconut water somewhere.
Well, I mean, when a song has, 1.5 billion streams, it's bound to
Yeah.
reach every corner of the earth like
That's
that.
crazy.
Well, we do this really fun thing at the end of the show, Jason, where we were talking about it just a few minutes ago, the top 5 list. So
Okay.
love to kind of get into this with you.
I'm going to fail at this according to some of your listeners.
You can never fail because it's just what comes to mind, obviously.
Yeah,
But,
that's the thing. Is like it's the top 5 that I could think of that I'm currently maybe passing by.
we were talking about this too, because there's certain artists that love to have a little time to prep for this.
Yeah.
Because they feel like they can sort of think about these answers. And sometimes it's super spontaneous. But let's start with Jason Mraz, the top 5 best singer-songwriters of all time.
Oh my gosh! So I had the Uber ride to think of this, by the way. So
Let's start with number 5.
to say all time, and what I've done is I've paired them up. So I'm going to give you 10.
Okay.
I paired them up. I'm going to say, and this is a stretch, but Remy Wolf / Jenny Lewis. All right. Remy Wolf is new. She's probably still a teenager and she's crazy, but I love what she's doing. Her live at Electric Lady
Yeah.
is a phenomenal live record, and it showcases some of her best songs and her really bizarro songwriting. And I love people who are still thinking outside the box. And I think Jenny Lewis is still doing the same thing. She
great.
just put out a great new record. It's quirky. It's beautiful. It sounds classic, but it still sounds like she just took shrooms and thought of it yesterday. It's great.
Well, I would say number 4, but according to lists, this might be number 9.
8 and 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Or no,
let's-
8, 7, and 8.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Sarah Bareilles / Casey Musgraves.
Good choice.
They're both also peers, about the same age. Sarah's undeniable. Her records are great. Obviously, she wrote Waitress on Broadway. And if you've not seen it, Girls 5 Eva, which is an incredible series on Netflix, now in its 3rd season. She also writes all the songs for that. And it's about a girl band from the early 2000s getting to have a comeback. But it's, super embarrassing for them, and their songs are just hilarious.
I
So
haven't seen it, but I'm going to watch it after this.
it's a great show. Sarah, shout out to Sarah. And of course, Casey Musgraves, which I think is like bending country music in a really fun, psychedelic way.
Sure. Number
So-
6.
Number 6, I'm going to go with a combination of Michael Franks and Emily King. So Michael Franks is from the jazz world, smooth jazz world, some might say, but his records really shaped my songwriting career. Very thoughtful. In fact, he was an English teacher at UCLA in the 70s before he got into songwriting. And his album, The Art of Tea, I think is just one of the sexiest, most romantic albums of all time. And I think Emily King is right there alongside of him. She's new. She's from New York, but she does jazz in a way that also feels like, hip hop in slow motion or something. Like she's just so freaking cool. She's like, how Prince was in his own lane, Emily King is in her own lane. So I think shout out to Emily King for that. Yeah.
Number 5, Jason.
All right, we're getting close. I'm going to go, this is a mix between Bob Schneider, who I mentioned before, and Jeff Tweedy. And in a way, I think they're kind of the same. Jeff wrote the book on, a book on how to write songs.
Wilco.
From Wilco. So Bob Schneider's the same way. I feel like he taught me how to write songs just through the encouragement and the practice of writing. And both of these cats, Bob Schneider and Jeff Tweedy, both have an immense body of work that you can't go wrong. If you listen to any record or any song, you'll get there, You'll be touched by God.
So that's number 5 and 4. So number 3.
No, that was like
that was
3
together.
and 4. So we're going to go to 1 and 2 now. Yeah. Gregory Page, who is a hero of mine from San Diego, who gave me my first gig in San Diego and has made probably 20 albums that nobody's heard, but they are online. I just think he's such a strong singer-songwriter and genre hopper, time traveler. And Willie Nelson, I'm also going to put up there. Willie is about to release his 151st album this year.
I would say that's a great number one. If that is your number one, Willie Nelson's
Willie
a great
Nelson's
number one.
my number one. Yeah.
And by the way, you got to smoke weed with him, so even better.
Many times. You know, one of my favorite Willie times is I went over his house in Maui, and I was expecting people to be there because there's always people around Willie's. He loves bringing people together. But we were alone, just the two of us sitting on his back porch. And I, had this 3-hour hang smoking weed with Willie, and all he wanted to do was play me new songs that he was writing, new demos. He was like, "Hey, want to hear these couple new songs I just put down?" And I was like, "Definitely. I definitely want to do that." And, he's like 86 at the time. And that was, and so here I am, like 40, this guy who thought he was going to quit, sitting with one of my mentors who was showing me that you're not going to stop doing this. He's like, if you've loved to do this since you were a kid, you're not going to stop doing it, even when you're 86. So that's one of the reasons he's my favorite songwriter, top 5 singer-songwriters, because why would you ever give up your joy,
Sure,
no matter how old you are.
Great choice. To our next question here, Jason, the top 5 best feel-good songs of all time.
Ooh. I'm going to have to remove "of all time" because I feel like it's mad disrespect to anybody who's not on this list.
Well, let's start with number 5.
All right. I was dancing in a lesbian bar, Jonathan Richman. Love Jonathan Richman. What a weirdo. But something about that song just gets me dancing. In fact, it's one of the songs that made me think I want to have a dance album one day.
Which led to your dance record.
Yeah, totally.
Number 4.
Surfin' by Ernest Ranglin. It is a tune that does not have any lyrics, but Ernest Ranglin is a classic reggae/jazz guitar player who has such rich melody in his guitar playing. It sings like a song. You can sing an Ernest Ranglin tune, but even though there's no lyrics, the melodies are strong enough. So I recommend Surfin' by Ernest Ranglin.
Number 3, Jason.
How about Adventure of a Lifetime by Coldplay? And this is a tough call, too, because, they're just like an easy pick, big pop band, global sensation. But, they came up like any other band, and they just persevered. And I feel like Adventure of a Lifetime, which is one of their later creations, was just one of those right song for the right band. It took them probably 6-7 albums to get that kind of song and that kind of sound. And it's just a big party anthem, Adventure of a Lifetime. It makes you feel good.
By the way, you go to a Coldplay show, you'll know every song for 2.5 hours. It's one of those bands that has so many hits, you forget how many hits they have. But
so many hits.
Great band.
Yeah.
Number 2.
Whip Appeal by Babyface. You know this one?
I do not.
Woo! Nasty. Babyface, I think, is another great singer-songwriter. He's written hundreds of songs and many for other artists, but Whip Appeal was one of his own from his early career when he was still making records. I don't know what to say about it other than that it moves me. It makes me feel good.
And the number 1 best feel-good song, not of all time, but just according to Jason Mraz.
I'm going to go with Night Moves by Michael Franks.
Good one.
The music fades in. The music begins and the titles fade in, starring you and me. Love is just a technicolor. What is it? Love is like two dreamers dreaming the exact same dream. Just another technicolor romance on the screen. Night Moves is the feelinest feel-good song of all time. And if you have a lover, or if you have someone that's potentially you're on the fence, or like you just are waiting for that move,
Play that song.
Put that song on. It is a panty dropper. When you put that song on, I mean, the first guitar lick, you mean business.
Yeah.
It's business time.
Put it on, folks.
Yeah.
Well,
Michael Franks.
Michael Franks. You've had a great life, Jason. I know living your dream is hard work. We didn't touch upon that, but I know you've been known to say that. So what's next for you?
I mean, I'm just going to keep doing this,
Feels like it's working for you.
It's working for me. if my phone rings and I get to do Broadway again, I'll consider it. If it's the right role. I'm going to keep my little farm business going because it requires, constant stewardship, and it's a life. It's something that, I'll pass on when I die or when I sell the property, I'll pass on those trees to the next farmer the same way I inherited those trees from the old guy I bought it from. Old man, look at my life.
Well, the new record just came out Friday, so congratulations.
Yeah, the record's brand new.
Brand new. The tour is coming up.
That's probably going to take over the next year of my life. But I'm already going through songs and trying to like daydream on what I'm going to make next. So
you're 150 songs into the next record already.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm a creator, so I enjoy the creative process, and I enjoy the magic of it, and that's hopefully what I'll keep doing.
This was a pleasure. You're a pleasure. Thanks for coming in. A lot of inspiration. Hope to see you again soon. I
Thanks
appreciate it.
so much.
Thanks, Jason.